The print should have all the information needed to build this part. The first place we look is the title box at the bottom, and then any notes or lists of parts if those are present. This print lists parts to make two different versions of this part. Measure the actual parts to see which ones they are and if the dimensions are correct. This print does not have tolerances listed, so use common sense here. Make parts as close to the given measure as is practically possible. The only thing that is given is the angular measurement, so that would mean that this is important. The welds are done in opposition to reduce warping, so plan the welding accordingly. This video is for laying out the cross slide, which is a BMM 151 and BMM 153 basic weld project that teaches the first 4 fillet weld positions, 1F, 2F, 3F, and 4F. So first things first, we gotta lay it out. So we have our surface here, and the first thing we wanna do is any surface we're working on, we want to wipe it down. Make sure there's no loose slag or metal or welded on BBs or something, which could make our part rock around and not sit flat on the surface. So with any build, we want to remember we need to have surfaces and things we can trust. We're always comparing our material to something that we know and understand. So this table, fabrication table, we know is flat, we know is very smooth. We know our holes are exactly 2 inches apart. It's our reference surface. We can call this a datum surface. It's trustworthy. We know it's good. So the next thing we need tools. So here we have combination square. And the combination square can do many, many different things. It has numerous surfaces we can measure against. It has a blade ruler with metric and inch markings on both sides. There's a 12-inch one, you can get 6-inch ones, 18-inch, 24, many different sizes. But all in all, what they have is a 90-degree face here, 90-degree face here, because if we lay it down here, 90 degrees here. We have a 45-degree face here with another 90-degree face here. And all these edges are ground very smooth and exactly 90 degrees to each other. So this whole thing is trustworthy. We agree to trust it. So everyone working with a combination square, they're all made the same and follow the same standards. So again, we can trust this. So we compare our material we don't know to something we do know, which is this. So now our material. So this is what we're going to use. This is 3/8 plate. It could be 1/4 inch. It could be different sizes. The size is not really important. What's important is how we lay this thing out. So we want to lay this out in a very organized manner, okay? When we're laying out measurements, don't do this. You should not have people doing measurements in the air like this. If you can't put your part down and let go of it, then you can't measure it. You need to put it on a surface, not holding and measuring at the same time. It's going to be inaccurate, so please don't do that. So this is it moves around the table. We want to kind of stop it from moving. So we can take a couple of pins like this, okay, and we can make stops that will keep our material from moving anywhere. Let's move it up here so you can see it a little better. Right there. This will keep our material from moving in that direction. But let's say I'm measuring, I'm still sliding. I can put a couple of stops down here and here. And now my material is fixed in position. 1, 2, it's fixed in 2 axes. It's going to hold it in place on this surface. You can still move this way so we can take it out, but it's going to keep it from moving in the X and Y axis over here. Now I'm right-handed, so I lay out things just like I write, from left to right. It's an organized, logical way. So that way I put my square up against here. I have a nice, firm surface to lay out against, and it's not going to go anywhere. So here's our material. So let's see what it is. So it says 3/8, we can check it. And it's a hair under 3/8. Now this is cold rolled, it's hot rolled steel. We can tell because of the very thick scale on it, also the rounded edges. And hot rolled steel, sorry, is going to be kind of, could be a hair under, it could be a hair over. It's a nominal size, so it's not perfect. It's close enough, and for most uses of this kind of metal, which are structural, generally very big things, kind of heavy things, a little bit off here and there is really not going to matter. If it had to be exactly 3/8, right on the money, then we'd be using cold rolled steel, which is much more precisely controlled dimensionally. Now, how wide it is, if I take my square like this, loosen the nut here, I can slide my blade across here. And we always want to make sure that this face is always touching the material. Be very careful not to do this, that doesn't work. It's got to be tight up against the face. Make sure it's not rocking around, okay? So now our blade is tightly up against our material, right here. Tighten up my nut again. I can see that I'm, a little bit, I'm pretty much right on 6 inches there. Maybe a hair under, but right on about 6 inches this way. And then for this dimension, same thing. I loosen the nut, put the square body right up against the material, run it. I could run it up against the stop. Now I know I'm right there. And I've got 8 and 8 1/16. So it's 8 1/16. It's a little bigger than 8 inches. So let's say if the print called for 8x6 piece of material, and our tolerance is plus or minus 1/16 of an inch, we're right at the edge of our tolerance, so we would be okay. But on the other hand, if the tolerance said, 8x6, our material tolerance is like plus or minus 32nd of an inch or 2/1000ths or something, then we would not be able to use this piece of material. So you need to know what the tolerances are on the print as we're preparing our material to make sure this material is right. Can we use it? Other things to check for is it square? Now, a square has a square built into it. That's what it does. So we have a trustworthy known square right here where we can check the corners of our material. And if it's touching over here, no light's coming through. Over here, two sides this way. If these are both 90, then these are going to be 90. So we're good. This is good. We know the material. We know how out it is. If somebody asks us, well, how out is the material? We know, oh, it's randomly this way. It's 16th out this way. If we had to divide this exactly in half, it wouldn't be 4 and 4. It would be 4 and a 32nd, 4 and a 32nd, and we would be exactly in the middle. So these are important things to know. So our material, this is the piece we need to put exactly in the middle of this one. So since we know this is 6 inches, I'm going to set my square to 3 right here, right on the line, 3 inches, tighten the nut up again, place it against this face of our material right here. I can slide it along. Now, we want to mark it out. So this is a piece of soapstones. You can see it's sharpened at an angle like that, which allows me to put it right up against the edge of the square to give me a very sharp, distinct line, and easily resharpened with a file or the edge of a grinding wheel. And I can make it again. You could use a scribe, like the tungsten carbide scribe like this one, but refrain from using things like Sharpies, like a dull pencil or something, because the width of that line, where inside that line does your measurement fall? It needs to be something sharp. In a pinch, you can use a tungsten, or even a welding rod sharpened to a point will be sharp enough to scratch onto a steel surface. Make sure your lines are distinct, tight, and small. If they're really fat, it could be anywhere inside there and you're really off now. For these purposes, this chalk line will work well. because it's easily removed also. You can weld over it without any problems. So here we go, 3 inches, we place it right up against the edge and just slide it down, and look at that. A nice distinct line all the way down. Real easy to do. So now we know this is the exact center of this plate. Now when laying out these ones, the next pieces that go on here, it's basically a back-to-back T. So this needs to be here. Now, the usual way this is done in structural things is that everything's laid out on center. That means this piece, if this is the center of it, I can just kind of eyeball it because it's really not big. For a bigger piece, I'll definitely measure it. But here's the center right there, center of our piece. It would be on center. Same as like like laying out a stitch weld or something. The pitch, it's always on center. Like you know, studs in a wall when you're building a house are always on center. Same thing. So this will be on center. Okay. Of course, you want to check the print to make sure it's laid out that way, because there could be a reason why maybe it's on the center, this is the center, maybe this plate's on one side of the line, or maybe it's another side of the line. But as a rule, these are all things that have to go in the middle of something. They're always going to be on center. That's the way building is done. Now, this is shorter in this one, so where are we going to put this? Well, we're going to center it up. So if I put this here, check with my square right here, I got 1 inch. So it's a 1 inch difference, which means if I set my square to a 1/2 inch, we're splitting it half and half. Right here, my 1 inch right there, a 1/2 inch here, like that. When I put this plate there on center, and then this one on center, now I'm centered on this arch plate, and I'm centered this way, and I'm centered this way. I'm going to re-square, bring my blade all the way down, flush with the table surface. I can check this way, and I can see that it's leaning slightly to the left, but bring it up. Now I'm exactly square, and this is what we want. The print says that this should be 90 degrees when it's tacked. We need to make sure that it is. So checking with your square as you're tacking and making sure this is square, that it is straight, is very critical. And even though this is a practice part, we want to make sure that everything we do here is laid out meticulously so it becomes a habit. If you do practice things sort of as a throwaway, oh, I don't need to be that strict, it's just practice, you may inadvertently catch yourself doing that same thing when you work on a very expensive, high tolerance part. So no matter what we do, we want to always follow the same habits every single time so it becomes second nature to us. So here's the first part of it. This is going to be tacked, and then we need to put on the other side, the other piece, but because we have this thing, fin sticking up here, we need to do things a little differently. So that's what we'll do when we return. Okay, we're going to tack on the two parts here so that we can move on to the other side and get everything together. So in tacking, we want to tack in the most favorable position possible, which is we don't want to tack where we're going to be welding, because now we've got essentially a speed bump to go over when we're going to weld out the part. And that bump is not going to get any better. You're not going to be able to melt it into the weld and make it disappear. Instead, your weld's going to go poop over it, and it's only going to get bigger. So either you have to grind it out to reduce the size and then weld over it, or why don't we just weld in put the tack in a better place so we don't have to do all that time wasting of grinding that is really very inefficient. So what we want to do is we want to put tacks at the end here and over here. This also has the benefit of reducing the amount of pull this is going to do. If we weld on the side here, your part's going to noticeably pull this way. when what metal contracts. If we weld on the left side, now it's going to go this way. Now, if we weld here, there's much more metal in this direction. 7 inches of metal. It's going to pull much less. It's much harder for it to pull this entire piece up than this 3/8 this way. Much smaller amount of metal, right? So if you think about that, placing your tack in the longest direction of the piece of material will reduce that pull and that potential distortion. So now we're going to check our part, make sure again we're on center. Here we're on center on top. Everything looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tack it in place. Make sure I got my rods in a comfortable angle for my weld. Everything is good. You're always going to yell cover to make sure anybody in your immediate area knows you're going to weld and protects themselves. Here we go. Here's one down. It's a little tricky with the 5P rods. So now I need to check. You can see it's a little bit off over here. So I'm going to carefully bend it back to where it needs to go. Over here. There we go. We're back on center. Now I'm going to tack this side. And there we are, and the last thing we're going to do is check this, and no, that's pretty good. It came out pretty good. We are square that way, we're on the center line, pretty good. Yeah, a little iffy on the tacks there with the 5P, but overall came out all right. So, and it's just a tack. So now what we need to do is we need to do this on the other side, and that will go back to the table for that. Now we have our part back on the bench. Now we have a problem. We've got this big fin sticking up, and how are we gonna do this? So again, we need to lay out our work surface, and we need to think intelligently about what we're doing. So we do have these large cube-shaped pieces. Now, again, what do we know about them? They're both the same size, which means at the same level. I can use these to help me. So I'm gonna move these stops out of the way, right here and here. Put this down here, and then, look, my part is now elevated, and you know, the fin is not in the way. So we gotta use our heads about what we're doing when we lay out parts. And that's part of the fun of layout and fixturing, is solving the problem of how do you hold things, how do I fixture things, how do I keep things from falling over. It's never the same way twice, and requires sometimes a lot of ingenuity to get done. So again, we already know the dimensions of this. So again, we're just gonna, now we quickly can lay it out. So we have these previously known. So if we had to make 100 of these, we could quickly lay them out, and it wouldn't take that long. So 3 that way, 1/2 inch this way, right here. And now again with this one, this part, we know this is our center right here. And this is our center right there and right here. So that we lay on here, right there. Now we have the completed part, and when we look at it, everything's exactly where it should be, and it'll look really good. So if you turn this in, you know, for an inspection, whatever, you know, the first thing people are going to see is that, wow, that part is well put together. Everything's square, it's straight, it's even. It just looks right. And that's what we want to always have in our work, that it looks correct, it's not sloppy, and it's well done. So now we'll use this same setup over on the welding table to hold the part up so that we can tack the other two, these two parts right here and complete the part. So now the second piece to put on, with the cube supporting the part, now it's flat again, even though it's raised up. I don't have to worry about that fin getting in my way. Now, if I were doing a setup that had to be really critical, I could clamp this whole thing down and it would be very rigid and have no issues about the part getting away from me or perhaps bumping and coming off the table. So again, we have the center lines marked out on this part, so we know where to connect up our lines. So we go here, that's our top part, yeah, and there we go. Now it's leaning a little bit to that side, so I'm going to tack it and then correct it so that everything lines up right. So again, when we're welding, you're going to yell cover. That makes sure everybody knows you're about to weld. So again, taking my square, I want to see just how far out we are. And you can see there's quite a bit out over here. So I need to bend my part over there a little bit. What I think I'll do is I'm going to, I'll weld this and then afterwards carefully move it with a wrench once it's secured to the table to bring it back to square. So even once you're done tacking, check it. If you can bend it back into position, great. If not, then be prepared to break off the tacks, grind off if necessary, and then repeat the process until your parts, what you have in front of you, looks exactly what's on the print. What you see is what you get. If it's not, then make the necessary corrections to bring it into compliance and in tolerance of what's on the print. Do not let sloppy work go. Okay, so let's do the other side, and then we're gonna straighten it out. Aha! But before we do that, take a look. So if you can see right here, there is a huge amount of daylight from that tack. So you can see, even though I'm in the longer area, it's still pulled up over here. You see that light coming through? That's something to watch out for. Every time you tack, it's going to pull. So what I need to do is clamp this down so it can't go anywhere. So I'm gonna go grab a clamp and set that up. So that actually, I tapped that down with a hammer and actually came down, so that was good. Now, when I tack it, I'm gonna hold that rod with this hand. Some people call it cue sticking. So it gives me a little bit more steadiness when I'm doing my initial tack. Of course, as you weld, remember you gotta bring your hand up to the stinger and you can't leave it there, it's gonna get hot. But in the beginning, if you have trouble starting your arc, this is a good way to do it. Sometimes you can also just brace against the top of your hand, like a cue stick. So here we have the completed part, and so it's going to be 4 welds. You see, put it this way, you can see it's a cross shape. You know, it's I'm a little off over here, but that is, you know, within like a 16th inch, so I think we're okay. I don't think we need to go crazy with that. It is centered, which is important. So the way we're going to do this is you have the 4 positions, okay? So it's going to be 1F, 2F, 3F, 4F. Now the welds are opposing each other. Not right next, you're not going 1, 2, 3, 4 like a clock. You're opposing, okay? An important consideration is all welds need to be opposing each other. They have to cancel each other out. This is a good habit to get into because it's going to neutralize those same forces that you saw pulling the part upwards. If you put it against each other, they're going to cancel each other out, okay? 1, you know, 1 times 1 is, you know, it's going to be 0, okay? Same thing here. Opposing forces, it's going to equalize out to 0. So you don't do them next to each other and then next to each other. Otherwise, you're going to pull your part apart. So position 1 is a 1F, and it's going to be straight up and down, okay? 1F means your rod is straight up and down this way, like that. And you go just as you write, left to right, right on the weld axis right here. That's this, okay? The yellow line is your weld axis. The red is your weld zone. This blue would be your heat affected zone on the part. So we're following that. So that's what you want to remember. Right in there is your weld axis. We're following that. So with the 1F, we're going to do a given number of passes. Again, that's going to be on your print. It could be a given number of passes if we're a practice thing, or it could be, let's say it's a 1-inch weld. Say, all right, how do I know what to do? How would I do that? So again, taking your square, a weld is measured by the length of the leg. So if we put a mark here, here's 1 inch here, okay? Flip the square over. Here's 1 inch right here, okay? Now, if we did the same thing we did earlier, okay? If I move the blade right to that mark, right there, lock down my nut, and I just slide along to here. Do the same thing on this side, right here, okay? Slide along. Remember, make sure it's the flat side, okay? Slide right along here. That is going to be our weld. That's going to be our 1 inch zone for a 1 inch weld. So if we're doing 1 inch weld, we'd have to come out to here, okay? If it was 1 inch, however many passes that takes, who knows? But that would be a 1 inch weld. If it was a 1/4 inch weld or any other measurement, that's the way you could do that in order to make sure you're in the right zone, you're in the right place. Mark that with chalk, a Sharpie. Then when you get to there, you know you're good. So that's 1F is straight down just like that. Now 2F would be over here, and that would be this. Okay, 1F would be horizontal. Again, here's your weld zone right there. So it would be, you know, looking like this, like that. Here's where you go, right here, and you'd fill out the required weld size until you're done. So that's going this way, just like that. Now the 3F, we go like this, and it would be a vertical from the bottom to the top. And we always want to make that practice, learning to weld from the bottom to the top, because in most instances, that's the way things are going to be. Only under very specific conditions, generally thinner materials in this, can you do a downhand weld. And it needs to be done correctly. Experienced welders can pull it off because they know where and when it's appropriate and will not cause problems. But if you're learning, do it bottom to top. Because no matter what, if you do it like that and it's done correctly, it's always going to be accepted and it's always going to pass, because you get much more penetration and much fewer chances to get lack of fusion in the root. Whereas with downhand, that's always a big risk, especially on thicker materials. So 3F is going to be this way, bottom to top. And now on this side, the 4F will be, it's hard to see where the camera angle is, but you're gonna be under here. So you're gonna be under there is going to be a 4F weld, which is called overhead. So we're gonna do these in sequence. We're gonna do 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the cross weld.